Before we begin, take a slow breath. Let the air move gently in and out, like the quiet rhythm of wind passing through distant trees. There is nowhere you must go, and nothing you must hurry to finish. For a little while, you can simply rest here, listening, imagining, drifting softly through another time. Tonight, you find yourself many centuries in the past, in a small village surrounded by fields and forests. The world is simpler here. No bright lamps glow in the night. No engines hum beyond the walls. Only the quiet sounds of nature remain: the wind across the fields, the creak of timber, the low murmur of rain on thatched roofs. You are inside a humble wooden cottage. Its walls are built from sturdy oak beams, its roof layered with thick straw that gently rustles whenever the wind moves across the village. Outside, a storm is slowly approaching, but inside there is warmth. There is the quiet glow of embers resting in the hearth. There is the familiar comfort of wood, wool, and firelight. And there is you, waking slowly as a medieval morning begins. Let the story unfold gently around you. You wake before the sun has fully risen. At first, you are not quite certain why your eyes have opened. The cottage remains dim, filled with the soft gray light that arrives just before dawn. The air is cool, and the wool blanket covering you still holds the warmth of the night. For a moment, you simply lie still, listening. Somewhere beyond the wooden walls, the wind moves slowly across the village fields. It carries with it the faint scent of wet soil and distant rain. Then you hear it, a quiet roll of thunder, far away across the countryside. It is not loud, only a deep murmur that travels slowly through the sky, like a distant cart rumbling along a road you cannot see. You remain still beneath the blanket, listening again. The cottage itself speaks in small sounds. The wooden beams creak gently as they adjust to the cool morning air. Somewhere above, the thatched roof rustles softly where the wind brushes across it. You blink slowly and turn your head toward the small window shutter near the wall. Only a narrow line of pale light slips through the gap between the wooden boards. Dawn is coming, though the sky beyond appears heavy with clouds, storm clouds. This is not unusual for this time of year. In many medieval villages, sudden storms could sweep across the land with little warning. Farmers often watched the sky carefully, learning to read the shapes of clouds and the movement of the wind. But inside the cottage, the morning still feels calm. You shift slightly beneath the blanket, feeling the coarse but comforting texture of woven wool against your hands. Wool was one of the most common fabrics of medieval life. It kept warmth close during cold nights and damp mornings, especially in cottages like this one, where stone floors and wooden walls could hold the chill of the night. Another quiet rumble of thunder travels through the distance. This one is a little closer, still gentle, still calm. You slowly sit up on the simple straw mattress that rests upon a wooden frame. The straw inside the mattress rustles softly as you move, releasing the faint scent of dried grass. Many homes in medieval villages used straw mattresses like this one. They were practical, easy to refill, and often replaced with fresh straw after the harvest season. Your feet lower to the floor. The packed earth beneath them feels cool and slightly firm. Some cottages used wooden floorboards, but many simpler homes kept the natural earth floor, sometimes covered with rushes or dried herbs to help keep the air fresh. For a moment you sit quietly, allowing your eyes to adjust to the dim light. Across the room you can see the low hearth, where last night's fire has nearly faded. Only a few dull red embers remain beneath a thin layer of gray ash. The hearth is the heart of the home. In medieval cottages, it provided warmth, light, and a place to cook. The smoke from the fire often drifted slowly upward through a small opening in the roof, though sometimes it lingered inside the room before escaping. This morning, the air carries the faint scent of cooled ash and burnt wood. It is a familiar smell, a comforting one. You rise slowly and walk a few quiet steps across the room. The wooden beams above you are dark with age, their surfaces polished smooth by many years of smoke and warmth from countless fires. Outside, the wind shifts again. A thatch on the roof whispers softly. Another distant thunder roll passes across the sky, like a slow wave moving through the clouds. You pause beside the shutter and gently push it open a small distance. Cool morning air slips into the cottage. The sky outside is heavy with thick gray clouds that stretch across the horizon. The sun is somewhere behind them, slowly rising but hidden from view. Across the village, you can see the dark shapes of other cottages, their roofs sloping low, their chimneys quiet in the early hour. A few thin threads of smoke begin to rise into the damp morning air as some of the villagers wake and rekindle their fires. Beyond the cottages lie the open fields, and beyond the fields, a line of distant trees where the wind moves through the branches like a slow breath. The air smells different now, richer, moist. The scent of rain is coming. In medieval villages, storms were a part of life that people understood well. Heavy rain could nourish crops, fill wells, and soften the earth for planting. But strong storms could also bring fallen branches, damaged roofs, and muddy roads that slowed travel. Still, the people of the village had learned to live with the rhythms of the sky. And today will simply be another day within that rhythm. You close the shutter gently. Inside the cottage, the dim light returns, soft and gray. The embers in the hearth glow faintly, waiting to be stirred back into flame. Soon the morning routines will begin. The fire will be rekindled. Water will be drawn. Bread will be warmed. But for a moment longer, you remain still, listening to the quiet sounds of the village waking slowly beneath the approaching storm. Outside, the wind moves through the thatched roofs. The clouds gather patiently above the fields, and the day is just beginning. For a few quiet moments after closing the shutter, you remain standing beside the wall, listening to the gentle stillness of the cottage. The dim gray light of morning now fills the room more fully, though the thick clouds outside keep the day from growing bright. The air inside feels cool against your skin, yet the faint warmth of the hearth lingers nearby. You turn slowly toward the center of the cottage. In the soft light, the familiar details of your home reveal themselves one by one. The room is not large. Most medieval village cottages were simple single-room dwellings where daily life unfolded around the hearth. Every object has its place, and every space serves more than one purpose. Heavy wooden beams cross the ceiling above you. They were cut from nearby forest trees many years ago, shaped with hand tools and fitted together without nails in some places. Their surfaces are darkened by smoke from countless fires. You reach out and gently brush your fingers along one of the upright posts beside you. The wood feels smooth in some places, rough in others where the grain rises beneath your touch. These timbers hold the cottage together through every season, through winter frost, summer heat, and storms like the one slowly approaching now. Another soft rumble of thunder moves across the sky. Still distant, still calm. You step toward the hearth. The fire from last night has nearly faded, but not entirely. A few red embers glow quietly beneath a layer of pale ash. Their faint warmth reaches your hands as you crouch beside them. In medieval homes, fires were rarely allowed to die completely. Rekindling a fire from embers was far easier than starting again from cold wood and flint. Beside the hearth sits a small pile of split firewood, stacked carefully against the wall. The pieces vary in size, some thin and dry for starting flame, others thicker for long burning heat. You pick up a slender piece and place it gently over the glowing embers. For now, you leave it resting there. Soon you will coax the fire back to life, but there is no hurry yet. Morning in the village moves slowly. The wind brushes across the roof again. The thatch rustles softly above your head. Thatched roofs were common across medieval Europe. Layers of straw, reeds, or rushes were tied together tightly and laid thickly across wooden rafters. When properly maintained, a thatched roof could last many years and offered surprisingly strong protection from rain. And when the wind moved through it like this, the roof seemed almost alive, whispering quietly overhead. You rise and walk toward the small wooden table near the opposite wall. The table is sturdy but simple, built from thick planks that still show the marks of carving tools. A few small items rest upon it: a clay bowl, a wooden spoon, and a woven basket covered loosely with cloth. You lift the cloth slightly and see several small rounds of yesterday's bread resting inside. The bread is coarse and dark, made from rye or barley flour rather than fine wheat. In many medieval villages, wheat bread was rare and often reserved for wealthier households or special occasions. But this bread is filling and sturdy. It lasts well through damp days and long work hours. You place the cloth back gently over the basket. Near the table stands a tall clay jug filled with water. Water had likely been drawn from the village well the day before and carried carefully home. In medieval life, clean water was precious. Wells were often placed at the center of villages so that every household could reach them easily. You rest your hand briefly against the cool surface of the jug. Outside, the wind grows a little stronger. A loose shutter somewhere in the village taps faintly against a wall. The first tiny drops of rain begin to fall. At first they are so light you almost cannot hear them. Just a soft, scattered tapping across the thatched roofs outside. You pause and listen. Tap, tap, tap. Rain on thatch sounds different than rain on wood or stone. The thick straw softens the sound, turning what might be sharp drops into a gentle whisper. Soon the rain will grow heavier. The dark clouds you saw earlier promise as much. But for now, it is only a quiet beginning. You walk slowly toward a corner of the room where several woven baskets are stacked neatly. One holds dried herbs, rosemary, thyme, and other plants gathered during warmer months and hung to dry near the rafters. Even now their scent lingers faintly in the air, mixing with the smell of wood smoke. Another basket holds onions and small root vegetables pulled from the earth weeks earlier. Simple foods, reliable foods. Medieval villagers depended heavily on such stored vegetables during wet days when work outside became difficult. You crouch and adjust one of the baskets slightly, so it sits more evenly on the floor. The cottage remains calm around you. The storm outside is still gathering its strength, but the thick wooden walls and thatched roof keep the interior quiet and protected. Across the room, the embers in the hearth glow a little brighter as the thin piece of wood begins to warm. Soon you will stir the ashes and feed the flame. Soon the cottage will fill again with gentle firelight. You walk back toward the hearth and settle onto a low wooden stool nearby. For a moment, you simply sit. The rain continues its soft tapping on the roof. Wind moves across the fields beyond the village. Thunder murmurs once more, now a little closer than before. Yet inside the cottage, there is warmth waiting to grow again. There is bread on the table. There is firewood stacked by the wall. And there is the slow, steady rhythm of another medieval morning unfolding beneath the storm. Soon you will begin the simple tasks of the day. The fire will be rekindled. Water will be warmed. And the quiet routines of village life will continue, just as they always have. You lean forward slightly, reaching toward the hearth. The embers glow patiently beneath the ash, waiting for the fire to return. The gentle patter of rain outside the window is the first thing I hear. It's a familiar, comforting sound that promises a quiet, slow start to the day. The air inside the cottage is cool, almost cold, and the darkness still clings to the corners of the room. It's time to wake the heart of our home, the hearth. The embers from last night are still there, a faint, sleeping glow beneath a blanket of gray ash. This is the first, most crucial task of the morning. Gently, I clear away some of the ash, revealing the tiny, precious coals of warmth. They look almost lifeless, but I know there's still fire within them. I add a small bundle of dry tinder, some wisps of dried grass, and thin strips of birch bark I prepared yesterday. Then I lean in close and blow, a steady, soft breath of air. At first, nothing happens. I blow again, a little longer this time. A tiny spark flickers, then another. It's a delicate dance, feeding just enough air without blowing the fragile embers out. Slowly, tentatively, a small flame catches the edge of the birch bark, curling and turning it black. It's a magical moment, watching life return to the fire. The flame grows stronger, greedily consuming the tinder. Now I can add a few small, dry twigs, arranging them carefully to give the new fire room to breathe. The twigs crackle and hiss, and the room is filled with the smoky, woody scent of a waking fire. The shadows begin to dance on the stone walls, and a welcome warmth starts to push back the morning chill. With the fire now stable, I can add a larger log, something that will burn slowly and steadily, providing heat for the hours to come. With the fire rekindled, my next task is to fetch water. The rain barrel just outside the door will be full. I open the heavy wooden door, and the cool, damp air rushes in, carrying the earthy smell of wet soil and leaves. The sound of the rain is louder now, a constant drumming on the thatched roof and the ground. I grab the wooden bucket, its iron bands cool to the touch. The short walk to the barrel is a refreshing shock to the system, the cold rain on my face and hands waking me up completely. I dip the bucket into the barrel, the water clear and cold. It's heavy on the way back, and I have to be careful not to slip on the wet ground. Back inside, I close the door, shutting out the rain but keeping its soothing sound. The fire is burning brightly now, its golden light filling the room. I set the bucket down near the hearth and fill a smaller clay pitcher for drinking. Then I hang the large cast iron kettle on the pothook over the fire. It will take a while for the water to heat up, but soon we'll have hot water for washing and for a warm drink. The smell of wood smoke now mixes with the clean scent of rainwater. The cottage feels alive again. The fire is the center of everything, providing not just warmth, but also light and the means to cook. My stomach rumbles, reminding me of the next part of my routine, breakfast. It's a simple meal, but after the work of starting the day, it will be the most satisfying. I take a loaf of yesterday's bread from the wooden box, where we keep it safe from mice. It's a dense, heavy rye bread, and it's a bit stale now, but the fire will fix that. I find a flat, clean stone and place it near the edge of the hearth, where the heat is gentle but constant. I slice a thick piece of the bread and lay it on the warm stone. It won't be long before it's heated through, its crust becoming slightly crisp and its inside soft and warm again. While the bread warms, I check on the kettle. Steam is beginning to rise from the spout. The water isn't boiling yet, but it's warm enough. I pour some into a wooden bowl for a quick wash. The warm water feels like a luxury, chasing away the last of the morning's chill from my skin. It's a simple pleasure, but one that makes a huge difference. Now, the smell of toasting bread joins the other morning scents. I turn the slice over on the stone to warm the other side. There's no butter, but sometimes, if we're lucky, there's a little pot of honey or a small piece of cheese. Today it will be plain, but the warmth itself is a comfort. The simple act of warming bread on a stone by the fire feels ancient and right. It connects me to every person who has ever woken up on a rainy morning and sought comfort in the simple trinity of fire, water, and bread. I take the warm slice of bread from the stone. It's perfect, not burnt, just heated through. I break it in half, the steam rising from the soft interior. Eating this, listening to the rain and the crackling fire, is a moment of pure peace. The day ahead will be full of work mending, cleaning, preparing the main meal, tending to the garden if the rain stops, but for now, in this quiet moment, everything is calm. The rest of the household will be stirring soon, drawn by the warmth and the promise of a warm drink. I pour some of the hot water from the kettle into a mug, perhaps adding a sprig of mint from the pot on the windowsill. The minty steam is invigorating. Sipping the hot water, I watch the flames dance in the hearth. Each part of this morning routine is a deliberate, necessary step. Nothing is wasted. Not the embers from the night before, not the rainwater, not the stale bread. Life is built around these simple, repetitive tasks. They ground you in the rhythm of the day and the season. On a cold, rainy morning like this, the warmth of the fire is more than just physical comfort. It's a symbol of safety, of home. It's the anchor of our world. The gentle, steady rain outside is a reminder of nature's power, while the fire inside is a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. As I finish my simple breakfast, the light outside is slowly changing from gray to a soft, diffused white. The day is beginning in earnest. The fire is now a roaring, happy blaze. The kettle is singing, and the cottage is filled with a warmth that feels earned. This is the foundation of our day, built with care and simple tools. It's a routine born of necessity, but it holds a quiet beauty of its own. Thanks for joining me on this slow medieval morning. I hope you found a little peace in it too. Don't forget to follow for more glimpses into the past. When the last of the bread has warmed, and the small iron pot beside the hearth releases faint wisps of steam, you rise slowly from the stool. The cottage now feels comfortably warm. Firelight flickers softly across the timber beams, and the steady whisper of rain continues outside. The storm has not yet grown fierce, but it has settled over the land with quiet determination. You take a moment to pull on your outer wool cloak. The fabric is thick and slightly coarse, but it holds warmth well and protects against the damp air beyond the door. In medieval villages, wool was among the most valuable materials for everyday life. Sheep provided not only wool for clothing, but also milk and sometimes meat. The cloak rests heavily across your shoulders as you tie its simple cord. Then you move toward the door again. The wooden latch lifts with a quiet click, and you open the door just wide enough to step outside. Cool air greets you immediately. The rain is no longer a scattered tapping as it was earlier. Now it falls in a steady curtain, fine but persistent, drifting slightly sideways with the wind. You step onto the narrow dirt path in front of the cottage. The earth beneath your boots is already softening. Small puddles gather between the shallow ridges where many footsteps have passed over the seasons. You pause for a moment beneath the edge of the thatched roof, looking out across the village. The sky above is a deep gray, layered with thick clouds that stretch from one horizon to the other. Somewhere beyond them, the sun continues its slow rise, though its light reaches the village only as a pale brightness behind the cloud cover. The cottages around you appear darker in the rain. Their timber frames and clay-filled walls glisten faintly with moisture. Thin trails of smoke rise from several chimneys, curling gently before dissolving into the damp air. Each home carries the quiet signs of morning. Somewhere nearby, you hear the creak of a wooden gate opening. A woman crosses the path a short distance away, guiding two small sheep toward a low shelter beside her cottage. She moves calmly, her wool hood pulled low against the rain. Animals were a constant part of village life. Sheep, chickens, goats, and sometimes pigs lived close to the homes of their owners. During storms, villagers often moved them quickly to covered pens or small barns to keep them dry. You begin walking slowly along the narrow path. The rain taps softly against your cloak, creating a gentle rhythm that follows your steps. On either side of the path stand more cottages like your own. Their roofs slope low, thick with layers of straw that darken slightly as the rain soaks into them. Thatched roofs were built carefully to allow water to slide downward quickly. The steep angle helped prevent heavy rain from collecting and damaging the structure. Even now, thin streams of water run down the edges of the roofs, dripping steadily onto the ground below. As you continue walking, the village reveals its quiet morning movements. A man kneels beside a small wooden cart, tying a cloth over a bundle of tools to keep them dry. He glances briefly toward the sky, studying the clouds with practiced eyes. Many villagers learn to judge storms by their color and movement. Farmers, especially, depended on these small observations to protect their crops and tools. Further down the path, a child stands beneath a doorway, watching the rain with quiet curiosity. The child's bare feet rest just inside the threshold, where the ground remains dry. The rain seems to fascinate young minds, even when it turns the paths to mud. You continue toward the center of the village. There, a slightly wider clearing surrounds the well, a circular stone structure where villagers gather each day to draw water. Today, only one person stands beside it. An older man slowly lowers a wooden bucket tied to a rope. The bucket disappears into the dark well opening before returning moments later, filled with cold water. Drawing water from the well was a daily task shared by many households. Some families carried water home each morning, while others visited the well several times throughout the day. The man lifts the bucket carefully and pours the water into a clay jug waiting beside him. Rain gathers along the edge of the well's stone rim, forming tiny streams that trickle down the sides. You pause nearby for a moment, watching the quiet work. Beyond the well, the open fields stretch outward toward the distant tree line you saw earlier from your window. Even through the rain, you can see the faint shapes of farmland, long strips of earth where crops grow in careful rows. Fields like these were often shared by the villagers, divided into narrow strips so each family could work their portion of land. Today, the rain nourishes those fields. Though storms can sometimes bring damage, steady rain was often welcomed, especially during the growing season. Another soft rumble of thunder rolls across the sky. Closer now. The sound moves slowly over the fields and passes above the village like a distant drumbeat. No one seems alarmed. Storms are familiar companions here. You turn slowly back toward the cottages, letting your steps follow the winding path between them. The rain continues its gentle fall. Wind moves through the narrow spaces between the homes, carrying with it the smell of damp wood, wet soil, and faint wood smoke drifting from chimneys. Somewhere behind one cottage, you hear the quiet clucking of chickens sheltered beneath a wooden overhang. Their feathers rustle as they shift closer together to stay warm and dry. Life continues calmly, even beneath the gray sky. You make your way slowly back toward your own cottage. The door waits just where you left it, the roof edge still offering a narrow strip of shelter from the rain. Before stepping inside again, you glance once more across the village. The storm has settled into a steady rhythm now. Rain falling, wind moving, villagers working quietly. It will likely remain this way for much of the day. You step back through the doorway, closing the wooden door behind you. Inside, the warmth of the hearth welcomes you again. The fire crackles softly, and the iron pot continues to warm beside it. Outside, the rain continues its patient song across the thatched roofs of the village. And the day's work is only beginning. The morning begins not with the sun, but with the rumble of thunder, a deep and distant drum roll that awakens the world. Outside, the sky is a tapestry of dark, swirling gray, and the rain falls in steady, heavy sheets, turning the world beyond the window into a blurred watercolor painting. Here, inside the cottage, the air is cool and still, thick with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and sleeping herbs. A faint light flickers from the hearth, where the embers of last night's fire still glow with a stubborn, ruby warmth. This is the heart of the home, the first thing to be tended to each day. I move quietly, my bare feet silent on the cold stone floor, and add a few small, dry sticks to the glowing coals. They catch quickly, crackling to life, and soon a small, bright flame dances, pushing back the shadows that huddle in the corners of the room. A larger log follows, one saved for just such a morning, its seasoned wood promising a long, slow burn. The fire's growing light reveals the familiar comforts of the cottage. Rough-hewn wooden beams stretch across the low ceiling, bundles of dried lavender and chamomile hanging from them, their faint fragrance perfuming the air. A sturdy wooden table and 2 chairs stand in the center of the room, their surfaces worn smooth by years of use. Along one wall, shelves hold earthenware pots, wooden bowls, and the simple necessities of a quiet life. It is a small world, but it is whole. With the fire established, the next task is water. I take the heavy clay pitcher and unlatch the door. A gust of wind and rain immediately pushes its way inside, carrying the wild scent of the storm. The air is alive, electric. I step just outside onto the covered porch and hold the pitcher under the steady stream of water cascading from the thatched roof's edge. It fills quickly, the cold, clean rainwater, a gift from the tempest. It is a taste of the sky, pure and fresh. Back inside, the door latched securely against the storm. I set a small iron pot over the flames. Into it goes a portion of the oats stored in a sack by the hearth. I pour in the rainwater, add a pinch of salt, and give it a stir with a wooden spoon. As the porridge begins to warm, a comforting, nutty aroma fills the room, mingling with the smoke and the herbs. This simple meal is the anchor of the morning, a promise of warmth and sustenance. While the porridge simmers, I move about the cottage, my movements a familiar, practiced rhythm. I check the small wooden shutter on the window, ensuring it is fastened tight against the driving rain. The sound of the storm is a constant companion, the drumming on the roof, the whistle of the wind through the eaves, the occasional, startling clap of thunder that seems to shake the very foundations of the earth. Yet inside, there is a profound sense of peace, of being sheltered and secure. Next, I turn my attention to the mending. By the fire's light, I take up a woolen tunic, its elbow worn thin. The basket next to my chair holds spools of homespun thread and needles of polished bone. My fingers, nimble from years of practice, work the needle in and out of the coarse fabric. Each stitch is a small act of preservation, a defiance against wear and time. The repetitive motion is meditative, my thoughts drifting with the rhythm of the needle and the rhythm of the storm. There is a rhythm to life here, one dictated by the seasons and the weather, not by the clamor of bells or the demands of others. A stormy day like this is not a hindrance, but a gift. It is a day for indoor tasks, for quiet contemplation, for the slow, steady work that sustains life. It is a day to mend, to bake, to read the worn pages of a beloved book, or simply to sit by the fire and listen to the world wash itself clean. The porridge is ready now, thick and creamy. I ladle it into a wooden bowl and add a spoonful of honey from the crock on the shelf, the sweet, golden liquid, a treasure from last summer's bees. I eat slowly, seated at the table, savoring the warmth as it spreads through me. The fire crackles, the rain drums, the wind howls, and in this small bubble of warmth and light, all is well. After the meal, I clear the bowl and spoon, wiping the table clean with a damp cloth. The day's work is not done, but it unfolds at its own pace. Today, I will knead dough for a loaf of bread, the rhythmic pushing and folding a satisfying labor. The warmth of the hearth will help it rise, and by midday, the scent of baking bread will be the cottage's new perfume, a smell of home and comfort that is even more potent on a day like this. I will also sort through the dried herbs, preparing mixtures for teas and remedies. The chamomile for sleep, the mint for digestion, the yarrow for fevers. Each plant holds a secret, a power, and working with them feels like a quiet conversation with the earth. I'll tie them into new, smaller bundles with bits of twine, their purpose renewed, ready for the seasons ahead. The storm shows no sign of abating. The light from the single window remains dim, a soft, diffused gray. But inside, the fire burns brightly, a miniature sun holding the darkness at bay. I check on the small box of kindling, ensuring it is dry and plentiful. I bring in another log from the lean-to, its bark damp, but its heart solid. Preparing for the future, even the near future of the coming evening, is an ingrained habit, a foundation of this life. Later, I might sit and card wool, the soft fibers running through my fingers, preparing it for spinning. Or perhaps I will take out the small, carved wooden flute that lies on a shelf and play a simple, haunting melody, my breath a quiet counterpoint to the storm's grand symphony. The music would be just for me, for the fire, and for the listening walls of the cottage. This is a life woven from small moments, from simple, essential tasks. It is a life of connection to the fire, to the food, to the shelter that keeps me safe, and to the wild, powerful world just outside the door. The storm is not an enemy to be feared, but a presence to be respected, a reminder of nature's might and of the value of a warm, dry place to call home. As the morning slowly bleeds into the afternoon, the rhythm continues. The bread dough is rising in a bowl by the fire, covered with a cloth. The mending is complete, the tunic stronger for the patch. The herbs are sorted, their scents clinging to my fingers. There is a deep satisfaction in this work, in the tangible results of my own two hands. I look out the window again. The rain has lessened slightly, but the wind still whips the trees in the nearby wood, making them bow and sway in a frantic dance. A bird, a brave sparrow perhaps, darts from the shelter of one branch to another. We are all seeking shelter, in our own ways. And here, in the heart of the storm, I have found mine. It is in the crackle of the fire, the taste of porridge and honey, the steady rhythm of the roof. It is a morning not of grand events, but of quiet continuities, a testament to the simple, enduring beauty of a life lived in tune with the world, whatever the weather. The day will unfold as it will, but it began here, in the warmth and the quiet, a perfect medieval morning. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe for more. You remain seated beside the hearth for a little while, after finishing your small repairs. The warmth of the fire spreads slowly through the cottage, easing the damp chill left by the rain outside. The flames move quietly along the edges of the wood, producing a steady crackling that rises and falls like a gentle rhythm. Beyond the walls, the storm continues. Rain falls in a constant whisper across the thatched roof above you. The thick layers of straw soften the sound, turning what might be sharp droplets into something calmer, almost soothing. You listen. In medieval villages, sound often carried clearly through the morning air. Without the constant noise of machines or engines, even small movements could be heard across the narrow lanes between cottages. And now, as the village wakes fully beneath the rain, those sounds begin to gather. First, you hear the faint creak of cartwheels somewhere down the path. Wooden wheels moving across wet earth produce a slow groaning sound, especially when the ground softens under steady rain. The sound rises briefly, then fades again as the cart moves farther along the lane. Perhaps someone is carrying tools to a covered shed, or transporting sacks of grain from one building to another. You imagine the slow progress of the cart through the muddy village path. Nearby, a cluster of chickens begins to stir. Their quiet clucking drifts through the damp air outside. Chickens were among the most common animals kept by medieval villagers. They required little space and provided both eggs and meat when needed. The birds likely shelter beneath a low wooden overhang or within a small coop beside one of the cottages. Their soft chatter blends gently with the rain. A moment later, another sound joins the morning, the distant lowing of a cow. It comes from somewhere beyond the row of cottages nearest the fields. The sound is slow and patient, echoing faintly across the damp landscape. Cows were valuable animals in village life. Their milk provided butter, cheese, and nourishment for many families. In some villages, animals were brought into shared barns during storms to keep them warm and protected. You lean slightly closer to the fire, resting your arms loosely across your knees. The sounds continue. Footsteps pass outside your cottage. Someone walks along the narrow path. their boots pressing into the wet soil. You hear the soft squelch of mud underfoot, followed by the gentle brushing of clothing moving through the rain. The footsteps pause briefly near your door, then continue on. Perhaps a neighbor making their morning rounds, checking fences, or bringing feed to animals sheltered from the storm. Village life depends on these quiet routines. Another sound drifts through the rain. Voices. Two villagers speak somewhere nearby. Their conversation is calm and unhurried, though the words themselves are softened by distance and rain. The tone suggests familiar talk perhaps, discussing the weather, or the condition of the fields, or the work waiting once the storm passes. In small medieval communities, neighbors often relied on one another for support. Information about weather, crops, and tools moved easily through conversation along these narrow paths. You rise slowly from the stool and walk once more toward the shuttered window. Carefully, you open it a small distance. Cool air slips into the room again, carrying the full chorus of the village morning. Rain falls steadily across rooftops and wooden fences. The cart you heard earlier now stands farther down the path, partially sheltered beside a barn. A man adjusts a cloth covering stretched across the cart's contents, protecting whatever he carries from the rain. Not far away, two chickens dash quickly across the muddy path before disappearing beneath the edge of a wooden porch. Their feathers shake droplets of rain into the air. A dog barks once from somewhere beyond the cottages, then settles again into silence. Even the wind contributes its voice. It moves gently through the narrow spaces between buildings, rattling loose shutters and stirring the straw edges of the thatched roofs. When the wind passes over the roofs, it produces a soft rustling sound like dry grass shifting slowly across the fields. Above all these sounds remains the quiet presence of the rain. Rain on thatch, rain on wood, rain on earth. You close the shutter once more. Inside the cottage, the sounds soften again, filtered through wood and straw. Only the steady patter above and the crackling fire remain clearly audible. You return to the hearth and place another small piece of wood onto the flames. The fire answers with a brief, bright flare before settling again into its steady burn. Stormy days often slow the pace of village life. Outdoor work becomes difficult, and many tasks move indoors. Some villagers mend tools or weave cloth by their hearths. Others prepare food or repair household items. The village continues working, but more quietly. You sit once more beside the fire. The warmth spreads through the room, pushing the cool, damp air back toward the door and walls. Outside, the storm shows no sign of leaving yet. The clouds remain thick above the fields, and the rain continues its patient fall. But the sounds of the village reassure you. Carts moving, animals calling, neighbors speaking softly. Life carries on as it always has, even beneath gray skies and drifting rain. Soon the time will come for the midday meal. The fire is already warm, and the cottage, sheltered beneath its roof of straw and timber, remains a peaceful place to wait while the storm passes slowly across the land. The hours pass slowly as the rain continues its quiet fall over the village. Inside the cottage, the steady warmth of the hearth has now filled the room. The earlier chill of the morning has faded, replaced by the comforting heat that spreads outward from the glowing fire. You rise from the stool and stretch your arms gently. The light in the room has changed slightly. Though the sun remains hidden behind the heavy storm clouds, the pale gray glow outside suggests that the day has moved toward midday. Storm clouds often make the passage of time feel softer and slower. Without bright sunlight or clear shadows, the hours drift quietly, measured more by routine than by light. Your stomach reminds you that it is time to prepare the midday meal. In many medieval homes, the midday meal was simple but important. It offered a chance to rest briefly from morning tasks and gather warmth beside the fire before work resumed again. You step toward the baskets near the wall and choose a small onion. Its papery skin rustles softly as you peel it away. The scent of the onion grows sharper as you slice it slowly with the small carving knife. Beside the hearth, the iron pot you filled earlier with water still rests near the flames. The water inside has grown hot, though not yet boiling. You add the onion pieces to the pot. They sink quietly into the warming water. Next, you reach for the sack of barley grain you examined earlier. Barley was one of the most common grains grown in medieval fields. It could be ground into flour, baked into bread, or cooked into simple porridge and soups. You scoop a small handful of the grains and add them to the pot. The barley disappears beneath the surface with a soft splash. Soon the mixture begins to stir gently as heat from the fire warms the pot more strongly. A faint aroma begins to rise. Warm grain and onion. Simple, comforting scents that slowly fill the cottage air. You place the lid loosely over the pot and adjust the firewood beneath it so the flames remain steady. Cooking in medieval homes required patience. Without precise heat control, most foods were allowed to simmer slowly beside the fire, watched carefully so they would not burn or boil over. Outside, the rain grows heavier again. You hear it more clearly now as it falls in thicker drops upon the thatched roof. The sound deepens slightly, like a soft drumbeat above the cottage. Wind follows the rain in slow waves. It brushes against the walls and then moves on again across the village fields. Thunder rolls once more across the sky, its low voice echoing through the clouds. Still distant, still calm. You sit near the hearth and wait while the pot continues to warm. Soon small bubbles begin to appear along the edges of the water. The barley grains drift slowly in gentle circles as the heat grows stronger. You lift the lid briefly and stir the pot with a wooden spoon. The steam that rises carries the rich scent of the meal beginning to form. Medieval meals were often humble like this one. Most families depended on grains, vegetables, and occasionally dairy products to sustain them. Meat appeared less often, usually saved for special days or after successful hunts. Yet even simple meals could feel deeply satisfying, especially on a rainy day. You slice another small piece of bread and place it near the fire once more to warm. The crust softens slightly in the heat. As you wait, you listen again to the quiet life of the village outside. The cart you heard earlier passes once more along the distant path, its wheels moving slowly through the wet earth. A goat bleats somewhere nearby, perhaps seeking shelter from the rain beneath a wooden lean-to. The soft clucking of chickens continues beneath one of the neighboring roofs. All these sounds arrive gently through the rain. You stir the pot again. The barley has begun to soften, thickening the broth into a simple stew. The onion pieces float near the surface, releasing their flavor slowly into the water. You add a small pinch of dried herbs from the basket beside the wall. Perhaps thyme or rosemary gathered during warmer months and hung near the rafters to dry. As the herbs touch the warm liquid, their scent spreads quickly through the steam. Now the cottage smells warm and inviting. Rain outside, fire inside, food simmering slowly beside the hearth. You remove the lid and let the stew cook a little longer. Soon it will be ready. While you wait, you take the warmed bread and break it into 2 smaller pieces. One you place beside the bowl you will soon fill. The other you dip gently into the simmering broth to test its warmth. It is nearly ready. You lift the iron pot carefully using a cloth wrapped around your hand. Then you pour a portion of the steaming stew into a clay bowl. The thick broth settles slowly, barley grains swirling in the surface. You sit beside the fire once again and begin eating. Each spoonful is warm and filling. The barley is soft now, the onions sweetened by the long simmer, the herbs adding quiet flavor to the broth. Outside, the storm continues its patient rhythm. Rain falling, wind moving, thunder rolling across distant clouds. Yet inside the cottage, the midday meal brings a moment of calm satisfaction. Warm food, warm fire, and the steady comfort of shelter while the storm passes slowly across the village fields. You finish the meal slowly, letting the warmth settle within you. The afternoon will soon arrive, bringing more quiet work to fill the hours while the rain continues outside. But for now, you sit peacefully beside the hearth, listening, resting, and letting the gentle sounds of storm and village life carry the day forward. When the last spoonful of warm barley stew is finished, you remain seated beside the hearth for a few quiet minutes. The warmth of the meal settles comfortably within you, and the fire continues to burn with a steady, patient glow. Outside, the storm has not yet passed. Rain still falls in long silvery threads across the village, tapping softly against the thatched roof above. The afternoon light remains dim. Storm clouds often keep the sky gray for many hours, turning midday and afternoon into a long stretch of gentle twilight. You set the empty clay bowl beside the hearth and wipe the wooden spoon with a cloth before placing it back on the table. The cottage smells of warm grain, herbs, and wood smoke. For a moment, the quiet comfort of the room invites you simply to sit and listen. But there are still small tasks to do. Stormy afternoons were often used for work that could be done indoors, repairing tools, preparing supplies, or tending to items that required careful hands rather than strong sunlight. You rise slowly and walk toward the wooden chest again. Inside, beneath the small hammer and carving knife you used earlier, rests a folded bundle of cloth. You lift it carefully and bring it closer to the firelight. It is a simple wool garment, perhaps a sleeve or small tunic, showing signs of wear along one seam. The threads have loosened slightly, where the fabric rubs against the arm during daily work. Clothing in medieval villages was valuable and rarely discarded quickly. Instead, garments were repaired again and again, patched and mended until they could serve no longer. You sit on the low stool near the hearth and thread a small needle. The thread is coarse but strong, spun from wool fibers by hand. It passes slowly through the needle's eye before you tie a small knot at the end. Outside, the wind shifts again. A stronger gust moves across the roofs, rustling the straw above your head. The rain follows, falling slightly harder for a few moments before returning to its steady rhythm. You begin sewing. The needle passes carefully through the fabric, pulling the thread behind it in small, even stitches. Each motion is slow and steady, guided by experience and patience. Sewing beside the hearth was a common sight in medieval homes. During long evenings or stormy days, villagers often repaired clothing, nets, sacks, or blankets while listening to the quiet sounds of the household. The firelight flickers softly as you work. Its glow illuminates the wool cloth and casts gentle shadows along the floor and walls. You pause occasionally to adjust the garment in your hands. The rain continues. Its steady presence forms a quiet background to the small, careful movements of the needle. After several minutes, the seam begins to close neatly. The worn edges of fabric are drawn together once more, strengthened by the new stitches. While you work, other sounds drift faintly through the cottage walls. A distant door creaks, open somewhere in the village. A dog barks once, then settles again. From farther away comes the faint tapping of a hammer, another villager, perhaps repairing a cartwheel or tightening loose boards on a shed before the storm grows stronger. These small sounds remind you that even during rain, the village continues its quiet activity. You tie the final knot in the thread and examine the seam. The repair is strong now. The cloth will serve well again. You fold the garment carefully and return it to the wooden chest. For a few moments, you stretch your fingers and warm them near the fire. The flames crackle softly, consuming the logs you placed there earlier. Their warmth spreads evenly through the room, keeping the damp air from settling inside. Beyond the cottage walls, the storm continues its slow journey across the countryside. Rain falls steadily over the fields where barley and rye grow in narrow strips of cultivated land. In medieval farming, Crops were often planted in long open fields shared by many families. Each household worked its assigned strips, caring for the soil through the changing seasons. Rain like this nourishes the young plants, helping them grow strong beneath the earth. Though the storm keeps people indoors today, the fields quietly welcome the water. You rise and walk once more to the window shutter. Opening it slightly, you look out across the village. The path between the cottages is now darker with mud. Small rivulets of rainwater run along the edges, carrying bits of straw and leaves toward lower ground. A few villagers still move through the rain, cloaked in thick wool garments like your own earlier. One person carries a basket beneath their arm. Another guides a small pig toward the shelter of a wooden pen. Even in wet weather, animals must be fed and tended. You close the shutter again and return to the hearth. The afternoon continues slowly. The fire burns steadily. The rain sings softly above the roof, and the cottage remains a quiet place of warmth and shelter while the storm moves patiently across the medieval village. Soon the day will begin its gradual turn toward evening. But for now, there is still time left in the afternoon for the calm rhythms of village life to continue within the wooden walls of your home. The afternoon continues in its slow, quiet rhythm. Rain falls steadily across the village roofs, and the soft light of the stormy sky filters faintly through the shuttered window. Inside the cottage, the fire burns comfortably, its warm glow stretching across the packed earth floor and the wooden beams above. You sit near the hearth once more, letting the warmth ease the small stiffness in your hands after sewing. For a time, nothing changes. The rain speaks gently to the roof. The fire crackles softly. The village beyond the walls moves in quiet, distant sounds. Then you hear something different. A faint set of footsteps approaches along the muddy path outside your cottage. Slow steps, careful steps, pressing into wet soil. You turn slightly toward the door as the sound grows nearer. The footsteps stop just outside. There is a brief pause. Then comes the soft knock of knuckles against wood. 3 quiet taps. Not urgent. Simply a neighbor's greeting. You rise from the stool and walk toward the door. The wooden latch lifts easily in your hand. When the door opens, cool air and the scent of fresh rain drift inside once again. Standing outside beneath a hooded cloak is one of your neighbors. The rain has darkened the wool fabric of the cloak, and small droplets cling to its edges. The neighbor offers a calm nod of greeting. In small medieval villages, neighbors often checked on one another during storms or difficult weather. Homes stood close together, and people depended on shared support through the changing seasons. You step slightly aside, inviting your visitor inside. The neighbor removes the cloak and hangs it beside your own on the wooden peg near the door. A few drops of rain fall onto the floor, darkening the earth for a moment. Soon the visitor settles onto the stool near the hearth. For a few moments, neither of you speaks much. Conversation in village homes often began slowly, especially on quiet days like this. The warmth of the fire invites calm rather than hurried speech. The neighbor stretches their hands toward the flames. Steam rises faintly from the damp wool sleeves. Outside, another soft rumble of thunder rolls across the sky. The neighbor glances briefly toward the sound, then back toward the fire. Storms like this are familiar. Still, people notice them, listening to the sky in the same patient way they listen to the earth. Eventually, the quiet conversation begins. The neighbor mentions the rain first, how it began before sunrise and seems likely to continue well into the evening. Rain like this, steady and soaking, is good for the barley fields. But if it lasts too long, the narrow village paths may become difficult for carts to travel. You listen and nod. News moves through the village this way, carried not by letters or distant messengers, but by neighbors sharing observations from their homes and fields. The neighbor also mentions that the small stream beyond the lower meadow has begun to swell slightly with rainwater. Nothing dangerous, Just another reminder that the land responds quickly to storms. You stir the fire gently with a small stick, shifting one of the burning logs so the flames rise a little higher. The cottage grows warmer. Your neighbor smiles faintly at the growing heat and leans a little closer to the hearth. Moments like this were common in village life. Simple visits, short conversations, shared warmth beside a fire while the weather passed outside. No one stays long, but the visit itself carries quiet comfort. After some time, the neighbor stands again. The storm continues beyond the door, though the rain has softened slightly now. The steady downpour has become a gentler fall, with longer pauses between heavier drops. Your neighbor lifts the cloak once more and ties it securely. Before leaving, there is another small exchange of words wishes for a calm evening, hopes that the storm will pass before night grows too cold. Then the door opens. A breath of cool, damp air fills the cottage briefly. Your neighbor steps back onto the muddy path and disappears slowly into the gray afternoon rain. You watch for a moment as the figure moves between the cottages. Then you close the door again. Inside, the cottage returns to its quiet stillness. The fire continues to glow. The rain taps softly overhead, and the faint echo of conversation lingers in the warm air of the room. Village life often moves this way: small connections, quiet visits, gentle words shared between neighbors who live close to the same land and sky. You return to your stool near the hearth. The storm outside seems slightly calmer now, though the clouds still blanket the sky. Evening will arrive before long, and with it will come the next gentle routines of the day: preparing the evening meal, tending the fire, and settling into the peaceful rhythm of night in the medieval village. For now, the cottage rests in comfortable silence once again. The fire crackles softly. Rain falls lightly beyond the roof, and the slow turning of the day continues. The quiet after your neighbor's visit settles gently over the cottage. For a while, you remain seated beside the hearth, watching the steady glow of the fire. The flames have softened into a comfortable burn now, their light moving slowly across the wooden beams and rough walls, casting long, dancing shadows that make the small space feel alive. Outside, the rain continues, though its voice has changed. What was once a steady, insistent downpour has now become lighter, drifting across the roofs in a softer, more peaceful rhythm. Occasionally, a gust of wind carries the rain sideways, brushing it against the wooden walls with a gentle patter before it returns again to its patient, vertical fall. The afternoon has begun its slow, inexorable journey toward evening. Though the sky remains thick with clouds, a dim, diffused light filters through the cracks in the shutter, suggesting that the sun has moved lower behind the gray horizon. You can feel the day winding down, a subtle shift in the air and the quality of the light. Evening will come soon, and with it, the time to prepare another simple meal before night settles its dark blanket across the village. It's a familiar routine, a comforting anchor in the flow of time. You rise slowly from your seat by the fire, your muscles a little stiff from sitting. Your gaze falls upon the basket of vegetables resting in the corner. In many medieval homes, the evening meal was much like the midday one, modest but warm, offering comfort and sustenance before the long, dark hours of the night. It wasn't about variety, but reliability. You walk toward the basket and rummage through its contents, your fingers brushing against the cool, firm skins of root vegetables. You choose 2 small onions and a handful of dried beans, their hard little shapes rattling softly in your palm. These beans were likely harvested months earlier, during the sunnier, drier days of late summer or early autumn. They were stored carefully in a cool, dry place to last through the wet days of winter and spring, just like this one. When soaked and cooked slowly over a low fire, they become wonderfully soft and filling, a staple of the simple country diet. You carry your small harvest to the table and begin preparing them by the warm, flickering firelight. The onions are first. You peel away their thin, papery skins which fall away in soft, translucent curls onto the worn wooden surface of the table. Once peeled, you slice them. Their sharp, pungent scent rises once again into the air, making your eyes water just a little, before it begins to mellow and sweeten as it drifts toward the warmth of the hearth. Next, you turn your attention to the beans. You rinse them in a small bowl of cool water from the clay jug. Tiny ripples form and spread across the surface as your fingers stir them gently, dislodging any remaining bits of dust or husk from the field. You carefully place the cleaned beans into the heavy iron pot beside the hearth. The sound a soft clatter against the metal. The fire greets the pot with a quiet, welcoming warmth. You add fresh water from the jug, enough to cover the beans and onions, then move the pot slightly closer to the flames so the mixture can begin its slow, patient cooking. There's no rush. The fire will do its work. Soon, the first faint bubbles begin to appear at the edges of the water, tiny signs of the heat beginning to work its magic. You take the long wooden spoon, its surface smoothed by years of use, and stir the contents. The simple meal begins its patient transformation once again. While the pot warms, you take a small piece of dried herb from a bundle hanging near the wall. These herbs were gathered during the warmer months, when the fields and forest edges were full of fragrant, growing plants. Many villagers, like you, dried herbs carefully, hanging them in fragrant bunches from the rafters to be stored for cooking during the colder or wetter seasons. They add a touch of summer's warmth to winter's meals. You crumble a little of the herb, perhaps thyme or rosemary, between your fingers, releasing its concentrated fragrance, and drop it into the pot. The steam, just beginning to rise, carries the scent upward almost immediately. It's a warm, earthy, and deeply comforting aroma that begins to fill the small cottage. Outside, the rain shifts again. You hear it soften further, now falling in scattered, individual drops rather than a steady sheet. Water drips from the edges of the thatched roof, forming small, syncopated rhythms as it lands on the damp ground below. It's a sound of the storm ending. And then, a faint, almost ethereal golden glow appears briefly through a narrow gap in the clouds. The sun, though still hidden from direct view, sends one last gentle, parting light across the wet village paths, making the puddles gleam like liquid gold. Inside the cottage, the fire reflects that dim glow with its own steady, internal warmth. You sit again beside the hearth, content to wait and allow the meal to simmer slowly. The beans soften gradually in the heated water, their firm shapes swelling as they absorb the savory broth. Cooking in homes like this often required this kind of patience. Without precise temperature controls or modern tools, meals depended on time, careful attention, and the steady, reliable warmth of a well-tended fire. It's a slower, more connected way of preparing food. You stir the pot occasionally, lifting the heavy lid to release a puff of fragrant steam. Each time, the steam rises thicker, carrying the growing aroma of the evening meal through the cottage. The room now feels deeply warm and peaceful. The only sounds are the fire crackling softly in the hearth, the pot bubbling gently with its promise of a hot meal, and the faint, fading patter of the rain outside. The scent of herbs and onions and cooking beans fills the air, a scent of home and comfort. Beyond the walls, the storm begins to move slowly away, rolling across the distant fields toward the horizon. Though heavy clouds still hang above the village, the rain grows lighter with each passing moment, the world outside growing quieter. And then, a new sound joins the gentle symphony. Somewhere outside, you hear the quiet, clear call of a bird. Perhaps it's a robin or a sparrow, one that has waited patiently for the storm to pass beneath the shelter of a thick bush, and now senses the calm returning. The sound feels like a small, hopeful sign that evening is truly approaching. You take the loaf of bread from the basket again and slice another thick piece. The dark crust breaks with a soft, satisfying crackle beneath the knife, revealing the dense, wholesome grain within. You place the slice of bread on a stone near the hearth to warm, just as you did earlier in the day. The gentle heat will soften it and bring out its nutty flavor. Soon, the beans in the pot reach the perfect softness you have been waiting for. You lift the lid one last time and stir. The broth is thickened slightly into a more substantial sauce. The onions have softened completely, melting into the liquid. The dark green flecks of herbs float gently across the surface. Using a thick cloth to protect your hands, you carefully lift the pot away from the direct heat. You pour the hearty stew into your clay bowl and sit once more near the fire. Outside, the last scattered drops of rain fall quietly across the thatched roofs of the village. The storm that began before dawn has nearly passed, leaving behind a clean, rain-washed world. Inside the cottage, the evening meal offers its simple warmth and comfort after a long day spent beneath gray skies. You eat slowly, savoring each spoonful. The beans are soft and filling, their mild, earthy flavor deepened by the sweet onions and fragrant herbs. The warm, crusty bread beside them is perfect for soaking up the last of the thick broth in the bowl. It is a meal that nourishes not just the body, but the spirit. Beyond the cottage walls, the village begins its quiet transition toward night. You can imagine doors closing, animals settling into their shelters, and the last whispers of rain fading slowly into the cool evening air. All is calm. All is well. Thanks for watching. Follow for more peaceful moments. When the last of the evening meal is finished, you place the empty clay bowl beside the hearth and lean back slightly on the stool. The warmth of the food and fire settles gently through the cottage. Outside, the storm that filled the day with rain and wind now seems to be drifting farther away across the countryside. Only a few drops still fall from the edges of the thatched roof. They land softly on the ground below in slow, irregular rhythms. Drip, drip, drip. Inside the cottage, the fire continues its steady glow. The flames are calmer now, no longer reaching upward in lively bursts, but instead curling quietly around the thick pieces of wood. Their golden light spreads across the room, touching the timber beams, the table, and the woven baskets resting along the wall. Evening in a medieval home often arrived gently like this. Without bright lamps or glass lanterns, the world slowly dimmed as daylight faded. The fire became the center of warmth and light, its glow guiding the final tasks of the day. You rise and carry the bowl to the small jug of water near the table. Pouring a little water into it, you rinse away the last traces of the meal. The water darkens slightly before you step outside the door, just long enough to empty it onto the damp earth beside the cottage. The air outside feels different now. Cooler, calmer. The rain has nearly stopped, leaving behind the fresh scent of wet soil and damp grass. The clouds still cover much of the sky, but they appear thinner in places, allowing a faint silver light to glow behind them. Across the village, several small fires burn within other cottages. Their smoke rises slowly into the evening air, drifting upward in soft gray ribbons. You close the door again and return inside. The cottage greets you once more with its quiet warmth. You move closer to the hearth and add one more piece of firewood to the flames. The log settles among the embers with a gentle crack, sending a brief swirl of sparks upward before the fire returns to its steady burn. The evening atmosphere deepens around you. Shadows gather softly along the corners of the room. The firelight dances across the wooden walls, shifting slowly with each movement of the flames. Outside, the village has grown quieter. Most people have now returned to their homes after tending animals and securing tools against the day's storm. From somewhere down the path, you hear the faint creak of a door closing. Another cottage settles into the night. A dog barks once in the distance, its voice echoing briefly across the damp fields before fading again into silence. Then comes the sound of an owl calling from the trees beyond the village, low and patient. The bird has waited through the storm, and now it begins its quiet watch over the fields. You sit beside the hearth again and rest your hands in your lap. The fire's warmth continues to fill the room. Moments like this were common at the end of medieval days. With most work finished and darkness gathering outside, people often spent time simply resting near the hearth. Sometimes families gathered to talk softly or tell stories. Other evenings were quieter still. The fire itself provided enough company. You glance once toward the window shutter. Though it remains closed, faint evening light still slips through its narrow edges. The storm clouds outside are slowly breaking apart. Somewhere above them, the first stars are beginning to appear, though their light has not yet reached the village fully. The night air carries the scent of damp earth and wet straw roofs. Inside the cottage, the scents are warmer. Wood smoke, cooked herbs, and the faint lingering smell of the evening meal. The day has passed gently, guided by the steady rhythm of rain and fire. From the first distant thunder at dawn to the quiet fading of the storm now, the village has moved through its routines calmly. Fields have received their rain. Animals have found shelter. Neighbors have shared quiet conversation beside warm hearths. You lean slightly closer to the fire, letting its glow warm your hands. The evening grows deeper with each passing moment. Soon the time will come to settle fully into the quiet hours of night. But before sleep arrives, there is still space for peaceful reflection and perhaps a story or memory shared beside the fire. The cottage remains warm. The storm has passed, and the calm of evening spreads slowly across the medieval village. The evening settles gently around the cottage. The fire continues to glow steadily in the hearth, its light shifting softly across the wooden beams and rough walls. The storm that filled the day with rain has now almost completely passed, leaving only the quiet scent of wet earth drifting through the night air. You remain seated beside the hearth, watching the slow movement of the flames. In medieval homes, the fire often became the center of quiet moments once the day's work was done. Without bright lamps or distractions, evenings unfolded slowly. People rested, reflected, or shared stories passed down through generations. The cottage is calm now. The last sounds of dripping rain fall occasionally from the roof outside, landing softly in the damp soil. Drip, then silence again. The firewood shifts slightly as it burns, producing a gentle crack that sends a brief spark upward before settling again into glowing embers. You lean back slightly and allow your thoughts to wander. Stories were an important part of village life during these quiet hours. Long before books became common in ordinary homes, history and tradition were carried through spoken words. Many stories spoke of the land itself, tales of the forests beyond the fields, where ancient oak trees stood for centuries. Villagers often believed that these old trees watched over the land like silent guardians. Other stories described travelers who once passed through the village roads, merchants carrying cloth, salt, or spices from distant towns. The arrival of traveling traders could bring news from faraway places that most villagers would never see. Even small villages were part of a much wider world. You remember hearing stories of great stone castles built by powerful lords many miles away, where thick walls and tall towers rose above rivers and valleys. But life in your village moves at a gentler pace. The fields provide grain. The forests provide wood. The village well provides water. And the small cottages offer shelter through every season. You reach forward and adjust one of the logs resting in the hearth. The fire responds with a quiet flicker of light that spreads across the room once again. For a moment, the flames grow brighter, illuminating the baskets of herbs hanging from the rafters. Many of these herbs were gathered carefully during spring and summer. People in medieval villages often knew the uses of many plants, some for cooking, others for healing small injuries or easing illness. Even simple knowledge of plants passed through stories and quiet teaching between neighbors and family members. Outside, the night grows deeper. The sky beyond the clouds slowly clears, though you cannot see it directly through the shuttered window. But the air itself feels calmer now. The wind that carried the storm earlier has faded into gentle stillness. From far beyond the cottages comes the low call of another owl. It echoes across the fields and fades again into the quiet. Animals in the village have settled for the night. Chickens rest inside their coops. Goats and cows lie quietly in their shelters. Even the village dogs seem calmer now, their occasional barks replaced by soft movements in the straw where they sleep. You allow yourself another moment of stillness beside the hearth. The firelight moves slowly across the room like a gentle tide of gold and shadow. In medieval homes, evenings often ended with these simple, quiet hours. Without clocks or strict schedules, people followed the natural rhythm of light and darkness. When the fire burned low and the night deepened, it was simply time to rest. You reach toward the wooden chest and remove a small wool blanket. The fabric feels warm and slightly rough beneath your hands. Wool blankets were treasured possessions in many households, especially during colder months. They provided comfort through long winter nights and cool evenings like this one after a storm. You drape the blanket loosely around your shoulders and settle back near the fire. For a while longer, you watch the flames as they slowly consume the last of the evening's logs. The glowing embers beneath them pulse gently with deep orange light. Outside, the village rests beneath a clearing sky. Clouds drift away slowly across the countryside. Somewhere above them, the first stars begin to shine quietly over the dark fields and silent forests. The storm has left the world fresh and calm. Inside the cottage, the warmth remains steady. Soon the time will come to prepare for sleep. But for now, you allow yourself to enjoy these final peaceful moments beside the fire. The stories of the day have been lived, and the quiet of night continues to deepen around the village. The evening grows deeper, and the cottage settles into the quiet rhythm of night. The fire in the hearth has burned lower now. The tall, dancing flames that once lit the room with their lively energy have softened into glowing embers. They pulse gently, casting a warm, orange light that feels like a steady heartbeat in the center of the home. Occasionally, a small piece of wood shifts in the heat, sending a faint crack through the silence, a tiny sound in the deep quiet. You sit peacefully, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, just listening. Night in a medieval village carries its own special collection of sounds. Without the constant hum of busy roads or distant machines, the smallest movements of nature become clear and distinct. You can hear the world breathe. Outside the cottage, the last drops of rain fall from the edges of the thatched roof. Drip, then another. Drip. The storm clouds that covered the sky for so long have finally begun to drift away across the countryside. The wind, which had howled and moved through the village roofs, now travels more softly. It brushes gently across the wet fields and distant trees, a soft sigh after the storm's fury. Slowly, you rise from your seat and move toward the wooden window shutter. Opening it just a little, you allow a narrow ribbon of night air to enter the room. The air feels cool and clean, washed fresh by the long rain. It carries the scent of damp earth and wet leaves. Above the village, the clouds have begun to separate, revealing patches of the night sky between them. A few small stars are now shining quietly in the darkness, their light faint but steady, like distant candles. The ground outside glistens in the dim light. Rainwater rests in shallow puddles along the muddy path between the cottages. The wet earth reflects small pieces of the clearing sky, like tiny mirrors scattered across the village floor. Looking across the lane, you see the other cottages, appearing peaceful and still. Most doors are closed now for the night. The warm glow of hearth fires flickers faintly through narrow window openings, hinting at families settling into sleep within their homes. Everyone is finding their rest after the day's work and the passing storm. You pause and listen again, tuning your ears to the night. From somewhere beyond the village, You hear the slow, rhythmic chirping of crickets. Their quiet, persistent music fills the spaces between the cottages and stretches outward into the surrounding fields. It's a sound so constant, it becomes part of the silence itself. Closer by, you hear the soft rustle of straw as a chicken shifts within its coop. Animals, too, sense the calm after a storm. They settle comfortably once the wind and rain have passed, finding their own peace in the stillness. Farther away, another owl calls from the edge of the forest. Its low, hollow voice carries easily through the damp night air, echoing gently across the landscape before fading again into silence. The owl will hunt quietly through the dark hours, gliding on silent wings above the fields where small animals move unseen through the tall grass. Its call is a reminder of the wild world that exists just beyond the village boundaries. You close the shutter once more, sealing the cottage in its own warm, quiet world, and return toward the hearth. Inside, the fire continues its slow transformation into embers. The warmth remains, though softer now, spreading gently through the room like a fading sunset. It's a comforting presence, a shield against the night's chill. You pick up one small, dry piece of wood and place it carefully onto the coals. You don't want to grow the fire again into a blaze, but simply to let it glow a little longer before you surrender to sleep. The log settles quietly among the embers. A few bright sparks rise and dance in the dim air for a moment before disappearing. The cottage smells faintly of wood smoke and the dried herbs that hang from the rafters. The wool blanket around your shoulders holds warmth close against the cool night air that seeped in from the window. You sit again on the low stool beside the hearth, your hands resting in your lap. For a while, you simply sit and listen. The sounds of the night continue their slow, peaceful pattern. The steady chirping of the crickets, the occasional, distant call of the owl, the soft, rhythmic dripping of water from the roof. These are the sounds of a world at rest. Occasionally, you hear a faint movement from one of the neighboring cottages. Perhaps it's the sound of someone adjusting their own fire or settling deeper beneath their blankets for the night. In this small community, you are alone but not lonely. The sounds of your neighbors are a quiet comfort. In medieval villages like this one, night was often a time of deep, profound rest. Without bright lights to extend the hours, most people followed the natural cycle of light and darkness. Once the day's work was done and the fire burned low, sleep came easily, a natural conclusion to the day. You glance once more toward the heavy wooden door. Beyond it, the village rests quietly beneath the now clearing sky. The storm that filled the day with thunder and gray clouds has now passed completely, leaving behind a sense of clean stillness. The fields beyond the cottages glisten with fresh rain, and the forest stands dark and silent along the horizon. And above it all, the stars are slowly returning to the sky, one by one, filling the vast emptiness with their ancient light. You take a deep breath, inhaling the cool night air that still lingers in the room. It carries the scent of damp earth, of straw roofs, and of distant trees, all washed clean by the storm. The day that began with a rumble of thunder and heavy, gray clouds has now ended in the most peaceful silence. Soon, it will be time to prepare for sleep. The fire will be allowed to fade completely into ash. The cottage will grow dark, lit only by the faint starlight filtering through any small cracks. And the quiet village will rest, wrapped in the calm of the night, until morning arrives once again with the promise of a new day. For now, there is only this moment of peace, this perfect stillness at the end of the day. The night has fully settled around the village now. Inside the cottage, the fire glows softly in the hearth. Its light no longer bright, but warm and steady. The embers breathe quietly beneath a thin layer of ash, casting a dim orange glow that gently illuminates the wooden beams above. You remain seated beside the hearth for a few moments longer, listening to the peaceful silence that has followed the storm. Outside, the rain has stopped completely. The air carries the calm stillness that often comes after a long day of wind and water. Occasionally a drop falls from the edge of the roof, but even that sound is growing rare. The village has gone to rest. You rise slowly from the stool and stretch your arms, feeling the pleasant heaviness that comes after a full day of simple work and warm meals. Before sleep, there are a few small tasks to finish. You move toward the door and check the wooden latch, making sure it rests securely in place. In medieval cottages, doors were usually held closed with simple wooden bars or iron hooks. It is not fear that leads you to check it. It is simply routine, a small habit repeated each night before rest. Next, you step toward the window shutter and press it firmly closed. The wooden panels fit snugly against the frame, keeping the cool night air from entering too freely while you sleep. Through the narrow cracks around the edges, the faint glow of starlight can still be seen. The clouds have almost entirely passed now. Somewhere above the village, a clear sky stretches quietly over the fields and forests. You return once more to the hearth. The fire no longer needs tending. The embers will fade slowly through the night, leaving only gentle warmth behind. Using a small wooden stick, you shift the coals slightly so they settle safely beneath the ash. This helps them cool gradually without sending sparks into the room. The motion is careful and calm. When you finish, the fire rests quietly once again. The cottage grows dimmer. Firelight still flickers across the room, but shadows now gather along the walls and floor. You walk toward the wooden bed frame resting in the corner of the cottage. The straw mattress waits there, beneath a folded wool blanket. Earlier in the day, it felt cool against your hands, but now the blanket holds a little warmth from the room. Straw mattresses were common in many homes during this time. Fresh straw provided softness and insulation from the cool ground below. During harvest seasons, many families replaced the old straw with new, fragrant bundles gathered from the fields. You sit gently on the edge of the bed. The straw shifts quietly beneath your weight, releasing the faint scent of dried grass. You remove the wool cloak you wore earlier and fold it carefully near the foot of the bed. The cottage feels calm and safe. Outside, the night air moves slowly across the village paths. The fields beyond the cottages rest beneath the quiet sky, still damp from the day's storm. Animals sleep in their shelters. Chickens tucked close together inside their coops. Goats resting in straw-filled pens. Cows lying quietly in barns beyond the cottages. The entire village seems to breathe slowly, as though the land itself has settled into sleep. You lie down beneath the wool blanket. Its weight is comforting, pressing gently against your shoulders as you pull it close. Across the room, the final glow of the hearth flickers softly. Soon even that small light will fade. For now it remains, a quiet guardian through the first hours of night. You close your eyes briefly and listen once more to the sounds of the village. The distant chirping of crickets continues among the fields. Somewhere far away, the owl calls again from the forest, and the cool night breeze moves lightly across the thatched roofs. The storm that began before dawn has passed. The village endured it calmly, as it has endured countless storms before. Fields have been watered. Roofs have held strong. Fires have burned warmly inside wooden cottages like this one. You shift slightly beneath the blanket, allowing the comfort of the bed to settle around you. The day's work is done. The fire is safe. The cottage is quiet, and sleep waits gently at the edge of the night.
The night deepens quietly around the village. Inside the cottage, the last embers in the hearth glow faintly, their soft orange light fading slowly as the hours pass. The warmth they release spreads gently through the room, lingering in the wooden beams and the thick walls of the home. You lie beneath the wool blanket, feeling the calm stillness that follows a long day. Outside, the storm has fully moved on. The clouds that once covered the sky have drifted away across distant hills, leaving the heavens clear and open above the sleeping countryside. Through the small cracks around the shuttered window, the faintest threads of starlight slip into the cottage. They are soft and quiet, barely visible against the dim glow of the fading fire. Beyond the walls of the cottage, the village rests. The narrow dirt paths between the homes have grown still and silent. Rainwater collected earlier in shallow puddles now reflects the stars above, turning the ground into a scattered pattern of faint shimmering lights. The cottages themselves stand close together, their timber frames dark against the night. Inside each one, fires burn low just as yours does. Families sleep beneath blankets of wool and linen, their breathing slow and peaceful after the long day. From the edge of the village comes the quiet rustle of leaves. The forest trees, washed clean by the storm, sway gently beneath the soft night breeze. Their branches move slowly, creating a faint whisper that travels across the fields and through the narrow village lanes. An owl glides silently above the rooftops. Its wings make no sound as it passes through the cool night air. It circles once above the quiet fields before drifting back toward the forest. Somewhere nearby, a cow shifts slightly in its stall. The faint rustle of straw marks the small movement before silence returns once more. Night in a medieval village is often this peaceful, without bright lanterns or distant roads filled with travelers. The land settles deeply into darkness. Only the soft sounds of animals, wind, and night birds fill the air. Inside your cottage, the fire continues its slow fading. The last small flame curls around a blackened piece of wood before disappearing entirely. Only the embers remain now. Their glow pulses gently beneath the ash, like tiny stars resting on the hearth floor. You breathe slowly beneath the blanket. The straw mattress beneath you shifts slightly with each movement, releasing the faint scent of dried grass once more. The warmth of the cottage wraps around you, keeping the cool night air at bay. Outside, the fields stretch quietly into the distance. Barley and rye plants stand tall and wet from the rain, their roots drinking deeply from the moisture left behind by the storm. The soil has been nourished. Tomorrow, when the sun rises again, the farmers will step out to see the fresh shine of water across their crops. But for now, all remains still. The village sleeps, the forest stands watch, and the stars above move slowly across the dark sky. Time passes gently here. Moments drift one into another, carried by the quiet rhythm of nature. You feel the calm weight of sleep drawing closer now. The day that began with distant thunder and grey clouds has ended in peaceful silence. Your cottage stands warm and secure. The fire has done its work. The rain has watered the land. And the village rests safely beneath the wide night sky. The last ember in the hearth dims slowly. Its glow softens, then fades. Outside, the fields lie silent beneath the stars. Inside the wooden cottage, you sleep peacefully as the medieval village settles into the deep quiet of the night. And somewhere far beyond the forest and fields, morning waits patiently for its turn to arrive. But for now, the world rests.